Months had passed since the battle that nearly destroyed Earth, and though life was slowly returning to normal, the scars of war remained. New Chicago was still a patchwork of ruins and reconstruction, its skyline dotted with cranes and scaffolding, as workers labored day and night to rebuild what had been lost. Streets buzzed with activity again, but there was an undercurrent of unease, a shared understanding that peace was fragile and the galaxy was far from safe. Daniel Carter found himself at the center of humanity's efforts to secure its future. His role as a diplomat wasn't glamorous. It involved long hours in meetings, navigating delicate negotiations, and trying to convince alien leaders that humanity deserved their trust. It was frustrating work, especially when some factions remained suspicious or outright hostile. But Daniel persisted, knowing that every small step toward cooperation mattered. Rachel Miller spent her days documenting the events of the war, piecing together a comprehensive report that would serve as both a historical record and a warning for future generations. She pored over logs, recordings, and personal accounts, weaving them into a narrative that captured the courage, sacrifice, and resilience of those who had fought against Cale Vorn. Her writing became a kind of therapy, helping her process the trauma she'd endured while honoring Jacob Hayes' memory. Elena Torres continued her work decoding Cale's files, uncovering layers of information that painted a clearer picture of his ambitions. What she found was chilling. Blueprints for even more devastating weapons, plans for infiltrating governments across the galaxy, and evidence of sleeper agents embedded within key institutions. Each discovery reinforced the urgency of staying vigilant. "Kyle may be gone," Elena told Daniel during one of their late-night discussions, "but his ideas aren't. Someone else could pick up where he left off." Kevin Blake focused on strengthening Earth's defenses. He trained pilots and soldiers, pushing them to adapt to new tactics and technologies. Under his guidance, humanity's military evolved, becoming more agile and prepared for whatever threats might emerge. Kevin also worked closely with alien allies, learning from their strategies and sharing Earth's innovations. Though wary of outsiders at first, he came to appreciate the value of collaboration. Despite these strides, tensions lingered. The Galactic Council remained divided, with some members advocating for stricter oversight of humanity and others urging reconciliation. Diplomatic missions were often met with skepticism, and progress was slow. President Laura Bennett urged patience, reminding everyone that rebuilding trust took time. Still, frustrations simmered among humans, many of whom felt they had proven themselves in battle only to be treated as second-class citizens. One evening, as Daniel reviewed reports in his office, Rachel knocked gently on the doorframe. "Got a minute?" she asked, holding a folder filled with notes. "Sure," Daniel replied, gesturing for her to sit. "What's on your mind?" Rachel handed him the folder. "I've finished compiling the timeline of events leading up to the war. I thought, you should see it before I submit it to the archives." Daniel flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing as he read. The document was thorough, detailing everything from Cale's initial manipulations to the final confrontation aboard his flagship. "This is impressive," he said after a moment. "You've done an incredible job." Rachel smiled faintly. "Thanks. But I wanted to ask, do you think we're ready for another crisis? If something like this happens again, will we survive?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, considering the question. "Honestly, I don't know. We've made a lot of improvements. Better defenses, stronger alliances, but we're still vulnerable. The Council doesn't fully trust us, and there are factions out there that would love to see us fail." "That's what worries me," Rachel admitted. "We got lucky last time. What if next time we don't?" Daniel nodded. "That's why we have to keep working. Every alliance we form, every lesson we learn makes us stronger. We can't afford to grow complacent." Meanwhile, far beyond Earth's borders, whispers of unrest began to spread. In shadowy corners of the galaxy, remnants of Kale's network stirred. Some of his followers refused to accept defeat, vowing to continue his mission of galactic domination. Others saw opportunity in the chaos, using the instability to further their own agendas. Among them was a mysterious figure known only as the Architect, rumored to be assembling a coalition of rogue factions intent on toppling the Council and seizing control. News of these developments reached Earth through intelligence channels, sparking concern among leaders. Daniel called an emergency meeting with his team to discuss the implications. If the Architect succeeds in uniting these groups, we'll face another war, and this time, we might not have allies willing to help, he warned. Kevin crossed his arms, his expression grim. Then we stop them before they get too strong. Hit them hard and fast. It's not that simple, Elena interjected. Their operations are decentralized. Even if we take out one cell, others will rise in its place. We need to target the source, the person pulling the strings. But how? Rachel asked. We barely know anything about this Architect. Daniel tapped his fingers on the table, thinking. We start by gathering intel. Reach out to our contacts in the Council and other species. Someone must know something. Over. The following weeks, the team worked tirelessly to piece together clues about the Architect's identity and motives. They uncovered fragmented messages, encrypted communications, and hints of a hidden base located in an uncharted region of space. The trail was thin, but it was enough to act on. President Bennett authorized a covert mission to investigate the base. Led by Daniel and Kevin, the team set out aboard a newly upgraded stealth cruiser, equipped with advanced cloaking technology and enhanced weaponry. Elena accompanied them, eager to analyze any data they recovered, while Rachel stayed behind, to coordinate support efforts from Earth. The journey to the uncharted region was fraught with danger. The area was riddled with asteroid fields, gravitational anomalies, and unpredictable energy storms. Navigating it required precision and nerve, but Kevin's piloting skills kept them safe. As they approached the suspected location of the base, they switched off all non-essential systems, relying solely on passive sensors to avoid detection. When they finally spotted the facility, it was partially concealed within a massive asteroid. Its design bore similarities to Kale's old base, suggesting a connection between the two. Automated drones patrolled the perimeter, and defensive turrets lined the walls. Clearly, whoever was inside didn't want visitors. We go in quiet, Daniel instructed. No unnecessary risks. Our priority is finding proof of the Architect's involvement. Using hacking tools, Elena disabled external cameras and triggered a diversionary alarm elsewhere in the compound. While guards rushed to investigate, the team slipped inside undetected. The interior was eerily familiar, a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors and humming machinery, much like Kale's base. Workers moved about, their faces blank with exhaustion, carting crates filled with components for unknown projects. Elena scanned the area, her device picking up faint signals from nearby servers. This way, she whispered, motioning toward a sealed door at the end of the hallway. Daniel worked quickly to override the lock, and with a soft hiss, the door slid open, revealing a large chamber dominated by a holographic display. On the screen was a map of the galaxy, marked with red dots indicating targeted locations. At the center stood a masked figure, their voice distorted as they addressed unseen subordinates. Prepare for Phase 2, they ordered. The Council will fall, and we will rise in their place. Daniel exchanged a glance with Kevin. This was the proof they needed, but capturing the Architect wouldn't be easy. Guards entered the room, spotting the intruders immediately. Chaos erupted as blaster fire filled the air, forcing the team to take cover. We need to download the data, Daniel shouted over the noise. Elena scrambled to connect her device to the terminal, her hands trembling as she initiated the transfer. Seconds felt like hours as the files copied onto her chip. Kevin laid down suppressive fire, ensuring no one reached them. "Hurry!" he barked, his voice tense. Finally, the download completed. Elena yanked the chip free just as a blast scorched the terminal, destroying it completely. "Let's move!" Daniel yelled, leading the retreat. The escape was harrowing, with enemy forces hot on their heels. Kevin covered their backs, taking down pursuers with precise shots. They reached the airlock just as reinforcements arrived, sealing the door behind them and sprinting toward the cruiser. As they broke free of the asteroid field, the facility receded into the distance, swallowed by darkness. Safe aboard the ship, the team exhaled in relief. They had done it. They had the evidence. But Daniel knew the fight was far from over. The architect's plan was vast, and exposing it would require more than just data. Humanity would need to rally its allies once again, standing united against a common threat. For now, though, they had taken the first step. Looking out at the stars, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The galaxy was unpredictable, full of dangers lurking in its shadows. But humanity had faced adversity before, and survived. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The battle was over, but the cost of victory weighed heavily on everyone. Earth's skies were no longer filled with the fiery streaks of lasers or the deafening roar of explosions. Instead, a strange silence lingered, broken only by the hum of repair drones and the distant cries of survivors searching for loved ones. Cities lay in ruins, their once bustling streets now empty and scarred. The scars of war were everywhere, on buildings, on landscapes, and in the hearts of those who had fought to protect their home. Daniel Carter stood on a hill overlooking what remained of New Chicago, one of the cities hit hardest by Cale Vaughn's attack. His uniform was torn, his face smudged with soot, but his eyes were sharp and focused. He had seen too much death and destruction in recent days, yet he knew the fight wasn't truly finished. Kyle may have been defeated, but the galaxy was still fractured, and trust between species would take years, if not decades, to rebuild. Rachel Miller joined him, her steps slow and deliberate. She carried a tablet under her arm, its screen glowing faintly in the early morning light. "The cleanup teams are working around the clock," she said softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "But it's going to take months just to assess the damage." Daniel nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We got lucky this time. If we hadn't exposed Cale when we did, things could have been much worse. But luck won't save us next time." Rachel glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think the Council will honor their promise to help us rebuild? Or will they turn their backs again once the dust settles?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "Some of them might want to forget this ever happened. Others will see an opportunity to keep humanity weak. We can't rely on anyone but ourselves." Despite the uncertainty, there were glimmers of hope. The coalition of alien factions that had sided with humanity during the battle had stayed behind to assist with recovery efforts. Engineers from these species worked alongside human crews, repairing infrastructure and sharing resources. It was a fragile alliance born out of necessity, but it showed that cooperation was possible, even after betrayal. President Laura Bennett addressed the United Nations Space Command in a solemn ceremony held in the ruins of the Capitol building. Her speech was brief but powerful, acknowledging the sacrifices made by so many and pledging to work toward lasting peace. "Cale Vaughn sought to divide us," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "But we have proven that unity is stronger than fear. Let this be a lesson, not just to humanity, but to every corner of the galaxy, that together we can overcome even the greatest threats." Her words resonated deeply, but Daniel knew actions mattered more than speeches. As the leader of the A team that had uncovered Cale's plot, he was tasked with helping establish new diplomatic ties with the Council and other alien races. It wasn't a role he relished. He preferred action to politics, but someone had to ensure that humanity's interests were protected, and he couldn't trust anyone else to do it. Elena Torres and Kevin Blake also played key roles in the aftermath. Elena worked tirelessly to decode additional files recovered from Kale's flagship, uncovering secrets about his network of spies and sympathizers scattered across the galaxy. Each discovery brought relief and sometimes fresh worries, as they realized how far-reaching Kale's influence had been. Kevin, meanwhile, led training exercises for Earth's defense forces, teaching soldiers how to adapt to the advanced tactics used by Kale's fleet. Though the immediate threat was gone, no one doubted that similar dangers lurked in the shadows. For Rachel, the hardest part was finding closure. Jacob Hayes' death still haunted her, a constant reminder of the mission that had gone so horribly wrong. She spent hours reviewing recordings of their final moments together, searching for answers she might have missed. Had she done enough to warn him? Could she have saved him? These questions plagued her, but eventually she found solace in honoring his memory. She began documenting their journey, their struggle against impossible odds, as a tribute to Jacob and all those who had lost their lives. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the battered city, Daniel and Rachel sat together on the hill where they had first surveyed the damage. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of ash and damp earth. Neither spoke for a while, content to simply watch the stars emerge one by one. "Do you think we'll ever really be safe?" Rachel asked, finally, breaking the silence. Daniel sighed, leaning back on his hands. "Safe? Probably not. There will always be people like Kale, people who think they can bend the galaxy to their will. But we survived this. That means something." Rachel nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the sky. "It does, and maybe we're stronger because of it." Daniel smiled faintly. "Stronger doesn't mean invincible. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. But yeah, I think we're ready for whatever comes next." As the night deepened, the stars grew brighter, their light piercing through the lingering haze of smoke and dust. Somewhere out there, beyond the reaches of Earth's atmosphere, countless worlds spun in endless orbits. Some were hostile, others indifferent, and a few perhaps willing to extend a hand in friendship. Humanity's place among them was uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt a flicker of optimism. He turned to Rachel, his voice quiet but firm. "We've got a second chance. Let's make the most of it." Together, they rose and walked back toward the city, their footsteps echoing softly in the stillness. Behind them, the ruins of New Chicago stood as a testament to resilience, a reminder that even in the face of devastation, life finds a way to endure. Ahead lay challenges and unknowns, but also opportunities to build something better, something stronger. In the weeks and months that followed, humanity set to work rebuilding, not just its cities, but its relationships with the galaxy. Diplomatic envoys traveled to distant planets, forging new alliances and mending old wounds. Scientists collaborated with alien counterparts, exchanging knowledge and technology in ways that benefited both sides. Slowly but surely, the galaxy began to heal. Yet Daniel never forgot the lessons of the past. He kept a small piece of wreckage from Kale's flagship in his office, a stark reminder of the price of complacency. When asked why he held on to such a grim memento, he simply replied, "So we remember what happens when we stop looking ahead." And so, life went on. The scars of war faded with time, though they never fully disappeared. Humanity emerged from the conflict changed, not perfect, but wiser. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to carve out their place in the universe. As the stars shone brightly above, Daniel gazed upward, his mind filled with thoughts of the future. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, full of wonders and dangers alike. But for now, humanity had earned a moment of peace, and in that moment, anything seemed possible. The journey back to Earth was tense and exhausting. The team aboard the stealth cruiser knew they were racing against time. Cale Vorn's fleet was already on its way to Earth, and every second counted. If they didn't reach home in time to warn President Bennett and the United Nations Space Command, humanity would face an attack it wasn't prepared for. The evidence they carried, the data chip with files linking Cale to the conspiracy, was their only hope of stopping the impending disaster. Daniel Carter sat silently in the cockpit, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. His mind replayed the events on Cale's asteroid base, the deadly weapon, the cold authority in Cale's voice, the narrow escape from certain death. He couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of Kyle's plan. What else was he hiding? How far was he willing to go to achieve his goals? These questions gnawed at Daniel, but there was no time to dwell on them. They had a mission to complete. Elena Torres stayed busy analyzing the downloaded files, piecing together more details about Cale's operation. She discovered messages between Cale and several rogue council members who supported his vision of galactic domination. These allies had helped him orchestrate the attack on Eridanus Prime and frame humanity for Jacob Hayes' death. Worse still, Elena uncovered plans for multiple strikes, not just on Earth, but on key colonies and neutral planets that might oppose Cale's rise to power. "This isn't just about Earth," she said grimly, showing Daniel a map of targeted locations. "He's planning to destabilize the entire galaxy. Once he eliminates resistance, he'll take control." Kevin Blake, sitting nearby, clenched his fists. "We can't let that happen. But how do we stop him? His fleet is faster than ours, and he's got numbers on his side." Daniel nodded, his expression hardening. "We focus on what we can do. We get this evidence to President Bennett and expose Cale before he strikes. If we can convince the Council of his betrayal, maybe we can turn some of them against him." It was a risky plan, but they had no other choice. As the cruiser sped through space, they began preparing for the moment they would arrive at Earth. Daniel rehearsed what he would say to President Bennett, knowing that every word mattered. One misstep could mean disaster. Elena double-checked the data, ensuring nothing was corrupted or incomplete. Kevin ran diagnostics on the ship's systems, making sure they were ready for anything when they reached home. When they finally entered Earth's orbit, the sight below filled them with both relief and dread. Cities stretched across continents, lights twinkling like constellations. Ships patrolled the skies, their movements hurried and frantic. Clearly, news of the approaching fleet had already reached Earth, and preparations for defense were underway. The team docked at a secure military station where soldiers greeted them with urgency. President Laura Bennett wasted no time. She convened an emergency session of the United Nations Space Command, bringing together leaders from across human territories. The room buzzed with tension as Daniel presented the evidence they had gathered. Screens displayed decrypted files, intercepted messages and images of Cale's weapon. Elena explained the significance of each piece of information, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "This proves Cale Vorn orchestrated the attack on Eridanus Prime," Daniel concluded. "He framed humanity to turn the Council against us and create chaos. Now he's using that chaos to seize power. His fleet is en route to Earth as we speak." Silence fell over the room as everyone absorbed the truth. President Bennett stood, her expression resolute. "We cannot fight this battle alone. We need allies. If we can expose Cale to the Council, we may be able to divide his forces and buy ourselves time." A plan quickly took shape. Using the recovered data, humanity would broadcast a message to the galaxy, revealing Cale's treachery. At the same time, diplomatic envoys would reach out to sympathetic alien factions, urging them to join the fight against Cale. It was a desperate gamble, but it was all they had. As the hours passed, the skies above Earth grew darker. Scouts reported that Kale's fleet was closing in, its ships massive and menacing. Fighter squadrons scrambled into position, bracing for impact. Civilians were evacuated from major cities, and shelters were fortified. The planet held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. Amid the chaos, Rachel Miller reappeared. After weeks of evading capture on Eridanus Prime, she had managed to hitch a ride on a smuggler's vessel bound for Earth. Her arrival brought a mix of shock and relief. Though battered and exhausted, she provided first-hand testimony of the events leading up to Jacob's death. Her account added weight to the evidence, strengthening humanity's case. Rachel joined Daniel and his team as they coordinated final preparations. Together, they monitored incoming transmissions, hoping for a response from the Council or any potential allies. Time seemed to stretch endlessly, each passing minute heavy with uncertainty. Finally, a message came through. A faint signal from a faction within the Council. They had seen the broadcast and were horrified by Kale's actions. While not all Council members agreed, enough did to form a coalition willing to stand with humanity. Their support wouldn't be enough to defeat Kale outright, but it gave Earth a fighting chance. Kale's fleet arrived under the cover of night, its ships blotting out the stars. The battle began with a deafening roar, lasers cutting through the darkness as explosions lit up the sky. Humanity fought fiercely, bolstered by the knowledge that they weren't alone. Allied ships joined the fray, targeting Kale's forces and creating openings for counterattacks. From the ground, Daniel and his team watched the conflict unfold. They couldn't rest yet. Kyle himself remained elusive, commanding his fleet from a heavily armored flagship. Taking him down was the only way to end the threat once and for all. "We need to board his ship," Daniel said firmly. "If we can capture him or destroy his command center, we might be able to cripple his operation." Kevin nodded, gripping his blaster tightly. "Let's do it. I didn't come this far to lose now." With a small strike team, they launched a daring assault on Kale's flagship. Navigating through enemy fire, they breached the hull and fought their way inside. The interior was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, guarded by elite soldiers loyal to Kyle. Every step was a struggle, but they pushed forward, driven by determination. At last, they reached the command center. Kyle stood there, his cloak billowing as he turned to face them. His eyes gleamed with malice, and a cruel smile spread across his face. "You're too late," he sneered. "My victory is inevitable." Daniel stepped forward, his voice unwavering. "Not while we're still standing." What followed was a fierce confrontation. Kale's guards attacked, forcing the team to fight for their lives. Lasers flashed, and smoke filled the air as the battle raged. In the end, it was Kevin who landed the decisive blow, disabling Kale's defenses and giving Daniel the opening he needed. With Kale defeated, the flagship began to collapse. The team retreated just in time, escaping as explosions tore through the vessel. Outside, the tide of the battle shifted. Without Kale's leadership, his forces faltered, and the Allied fleet pressed its advantage. As dawn broke over Earth, the skies cleared, revealing a battered but victorious planet. Humanity had survived, thanks to the bravery of those who refused to give up. But even as celebrations began, Daniel knew the galaxy still faced challenges. Kale's influence ran deep, and rebuilding trust would take time. Standing beside Rachel, he looked out at the horizon. The war was over, for now. But the scars would remain. And somewhere in the vastness of space, new dangers awaited. The discovery of Kale Vorn's involvement changed everything. Daniel Carter and his team now had a name, a faceless enemy pulling strings from the shadows. But knowing who was behind the conspiracy wasn't enough. They needed proof, solid, undeniable evidence that could expose Kale's treachery to the galaxy. Without it, Humanity would remain the scapegoat, and war would be inevitable. As the stealth cruiser sped through the vast emptiness of space, Elena Torres worked tirelessly on the data recovered from Rachel Miller's escape pod. The logs hinted at Kale's location, a remote asteroid base hidden deep within the Orion Nebula. It was a dangerous place, shrouded in swirling clouds of gas and dust, making it nearly impossible to detect. If Kale had chosen this spot as his hideout, he clearly valued secrecy above all else. "We're going in blind," Kevin Blake said, leaning back in his seat with a frown. "If he's expecting us, we won't last 5 minutes." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. "He might not expect us, but he'll definitely have defenses. We'll need to move carefully." Elena looked up from her tablet, her expression serious. "There's more. The logs mention experimental weapons. If we don't stop him, he could use them against Earth, or anyone who opposes him." The thought sent a chill through the small cabin. Kyle wasn't just plotting political dominance. He was building tools of destruction. Every moment they delayed gave him more time to prepare. They couldn't afford to hesitate. When they reached the edge of the Orion Nebula, the crew activated the ship's cloaking device, rendering it invisible to sensors. The nebula was a chaotic swirl of colors, bright streaks of light cutting through thick veils of cosmic dust. Navigating it required precision, and Kevin took the controls with steady hands. Slowly, they made their way deeper into the maelstrom, scanning for any sign of activity. It didn't take long to find Kyle's base. Hidden among the asteroids, it was a sprawling complex of jagged metal structures connected by narrow walkways. Automated defense drones patrolled the perimeter, their red lights blinking ominously. The sight sent a wave of unease through the team, but they pressed on. "Stay low and stay quiet," Daniel instructed as they prepared to disembark. "We're here to gather evidence, not start a fight. If we get caught, we're finished." Kevin armed himself with a compact blaster rifle, checking its charge before nodding. Elena carried a portable scanner designed to detect encrypted files, while Daniel equipped himself with a small toolkit for bypassing security systems. Together, they slipped out of the cruiser and onto the surface of the asteroid. The airlock leading into the base was heavily guarded, but Daniel had anticipated this. Using a hacking device, he disabled the external cameras and triggered a false alarm elsewhere in the facility. The guards scrambled to investigate, leaving the entrance unattended. Once inside, the team moved quickly, sticking to the shadows and avoiding patrols. The interior of the base was a maze of dimly lit corridors and humming machinery. Workers, aliens of various species, moved about, their faces blank with exhaustion. Some carried tools, others hauled crates filled with strange components. It was clear they were being forced to build something, though what exactly remained unclear. Elena scanned the area, her device picking up faint signals from nearby servers. "This way," she whispered, motioning toward a sealed door at the end of the hallway. Daniel knelt beside it, working swiftly to override the lock. With a soft hiss, the door slid open, revealing a large chamber filled with advanced technology. In the center of the room stood a massive weapon, its design unlike anything they'd ever seen. Sleek and menacing, it pulsed with an eerie blue light. Panels along its sides displayed streams of alien symbols, shifting rapidly as if alive. Elena approached cautiously, her scanner analyzing the data. This is bad," she murmured, her voice trembling. "It's a planet killer. One shot could obliterate an entire world." Daniel clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. "Kale's planning to use this to enforce his rule. He'll destroy anyone who stands in his way." They didn't have time to dwell on the implications. Footsteps echoed down the corridor outside, growing louder. Someone was coming. Quickly, they hid behind a stack of crates, watching as a group of armored guards entered the room. At their head was a tall figure draped in a dark cloak, the unmistakable silhouette of Cale Vorn. Cale strode confidently toward the weapon, inspecting it with a critical eye. His voice carried a cold authority as he spoke to his subordinates. "Ensure the calibration is complete by tomorrow. I want this ready for deployment. The Council will see the error of their ways soon enough." Daniel exchanged a glance with Kevin. This was their chance. If they could capture Cale or record his confession, they'd have the evidence they needed. But getting close enough without being detected would be nearly impossible. Elena tapped Daniel's arm urgently, pointing to her scanner. She had found a terminal nearby that stored detailed plans for the weapon, including timestamps and authorization, codes linking it directly to Cale. If they could download the information, it would serve as irrefutable proof of his guilt. While Kyle continued his inspection, Daniel crept toward the terminal, moving silently across the floor. His heart pounded in his chest, each step feeling like it might give him away. Reaching the console, he inserted a data chip and began copying the files. The process felt agonizingly slow, every second stretching into an eternity. Suddenly, one of the guards turned, spotting movement near the crates. "Over there!" he shouted, raising his weapon. Kevin sprang into action, firing a stun bolt that dropped the guard instantly. Chaos erupted as alarms blared and reinforcements poured into the room. Laser blasts ricocheted off walls, forcing the team to take cover. Daniel yanked the data chip free just as a blast scorched the terminal, destroying it completely. "Move!" Kevin barked, laying down suppressive fire as they retreated toward the exit. The journey back to the cruiser was a blur of adrenaline and desperation. Guards pursued them relentlessly, their shouts echoing through the corridors. Daniel led the way, navigating twists and turns until they reached the airlock. Kevin covered their escape, ensuring no one followed them outside. Once aboard the cruiser, they wasted no time. Kevin fired up the engines, and the ship shot forward, narrowly dodging incoming fire from patrol drones. Behind them, the base receded into the distance, swallowed by the nebula's swirling haze. As they broke free of the cloud, Daniel finally allowed himself a moment of relief. They had done it. They had the evidence. But their mission was far from over. Now, they had to return to Earth and present their findings to President Bennett. Humanity's fate rested on what they had uncovered. Elena reviewed the downloaded files, her expression grim. "This is worse than we thought," she said quietly. "Cale's already dispatched a fleet to attack Earth. We don't have much time." Daniel stared out the viewport, the weight of responsibility pressing heavily on his shoulders. "Then we'd better hurry," he replied, "because if we fail, there won't be a second chance." Back on Earth, the news of Jacob Hayes' death hit like a thunderclap. The explosion at the Galactic Council's chambers had been broadcast across the galaxy, and within hours, every human colony was buzzing with fear and anger. People gathered, in streets and public squares, demanding answers. How could the Council summon an envoy only to kill him? Was this an act of war? No one knew for sure, but the implications were clear. Humanity stood on the brink of disaster. President Laura Bennett, a seasoned leader known for her calm under pressure, called an emergency meeting of the United Nations Space Command. The room was packed with military officers, scientists, and diplomats, all talking over one another in frantic voices. Some argued that Earth should retaliate immediately, launching a full-scale attack against the Council. Others urged caution, warning that rash actions could escalate into a galactic conflict no one could win. Amid the chaos, President Bennett raised her hand, signaling for silence. "We cannot afford panic," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the noise. "Jacob Hayes died serving humanity, and we owe it to him and to ourselves to uncover the truth before we act. If we rush blindly into war, we play right into whoever set this trap." Her words calmed the room, though the tension remained thick. After a brief pause, she turned to Daniel Carter, a decorated war veteran who had recently transitioned into a role as a strategist. Daniel was a man of few words, his face lined with scars from battles fought long ago. His reputation as a tactician made him the perfect choice to lead the investigation. "Daniel," President Bennett said, "I'm putting you in charge of finding out what really happened on Eridanus Prime. Bring back proof. Proof that will either exonerate us or justify our response." Daniel nodded, his expression grim. He didn't speak much during the meeting, but his mind was already racing. This wasn't just about solving a mystery, it was about preventing a catastrophe. If they couldn't clear humanity's name, the Council might declare war, and the consequences would be unimaginable. To assist him, Daniel assembled a small team of experts. First was Elena Torres, a linguist who specialized in alien languages. Her ability to decipher complex codes and translate foreign scripts had saved countless lives in previous missions. Then there was Kevin Blake, a former pilot with unparalleled combat skills. Kevin's quick reflexes and sharp instincts made him invaluable in dangerous situations. Together, they formed a tight-knit unit, each bringing something unique to the table. Their first task was to analyze any data Rachel Miller might have sent before losing contact. Rachel, despite being stranded on Eridanus Prime, had managed to transmit fragments of information before vanishing. These transmissions contained snippets of audio, video, and encrypted files that hinted at betrayal within the Council itself. Daniel and his team pored over the recordings late into the night, piecing together clues like detectives solving a puzzle. Elena worked tirelessly, her fingers flying over her keyboard as she decrypted alien symbols and reconstructed damaged files. "This part here," she said one evening, pointing to a section of text on her screen. "It mentions someone named Cale Vorn. Does that name mean anything to you?" Kevin shook his head. "Never heard of him. Who is he?" Daniel frowned, leaning closer to examine the text. "Kyle Vorn. I think I've read about him somewhere. He used to be a council member, but he disappeared years ago after opposing their policies. Rumor has it he wanted to overthrow them." Elena nodded, her eyes narrowing. "If he's involved, it could explain why the council summoned Jacob in the first place. Maybe they weren't lying when they accused us of violating treaties. Maybe someone else planted evidence to frame us." The idea sent a chill down everyone's spines. If Cale Vorn was behind the attack, it meant the entire situation was a setup, a calculated move to turn the Council against humanity. But proving it wouldn't be easy. They needed more evidence, something concrete that could expose Cale's plan. As the days passed, Daniel grew increasingly concerned about Rachel's fate. She was their only link to the events on Eridanus Prime, and if she was still alive, she might hold the key to unraveling the conspiracy. Yet, attempts to locate her had failed so far. Communication channels were jammed, and reconnaissance drones sent to scout the planet had gone dark. One night, while reviewing Rachel's final transmission, Elena stumbled upon something unexpected. Hidden deep within the corrupted files was a faint signal, a distress beacon emanating from a remote sector of Eridanus Prime. It wasn't much, but it gave them hope. "This could be her," Elena said, excitement creeping into her voice. "If we can track the signal, we might find her." Daniel wasted no time. He ordered the team to prepare for departure, commandeering a stealth cruiser capable of evading detection. The ship was small but fast, equipped with advanced cloaking technology designed to slip past enemy defenses unnoticed. As they boarded, Daniel reminded everyone of the mission's importance. "We're not just looking for Rachel," he said. "We're searching for the truth. Without it, humanity won't stand a chance." The journey to Eridanus Prime was tense. Everyone aboard the cruiser knew the risks. The Council's forces were likely patrolling the area, and venturing too close could mean capture, or worse. Kevin took the helm, guiding the ship through asteroid fields and dense clouds of debris. His steady hands kept them safe, even as alarms blared and warning lights flashed. When they finally reached the source of the distress signal, they found themselves hovering above a desolate wasteland. The landscape below was scarred by craters and littered with the remnants of destroyed buildings. It looked like a battlefield, though there were no signs of life. Using the ship's scanners, they located a small escape pod partially buried in the dirt. Kevin piloted the cruiser down for a closer look. Inside the pod, they discovered fragments of Rachel's equipment, including a damaged tablet containing additional logs. Though most of the data was unreadable, Elena managed to recover enough to confirm Rachel's suspicions. Kyle Vorn was indeed orchestrating the chaos. According to the logs, Kyle had infiltrated the Council's ranks, manipulating events to create distrust between species. His ultimate goal was to seize control of the Council and use its resources to dominate the galaxy. "This changes everything," Daniel muttered, staring at the recovered files. "If we can prove Kale's involvement, we might be able to stop him before he starts a war. But stopping Kale wouldn't be easy. He was cunning, resourceful, and dangerously ambitious. Worse, he had allies within the Council who shared his vision of a unified empire ruled by strength. To expose him, they would need irrefutable evidence, and they would need it soon." As the team prepared to leave Eridanus Prime, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had uncovered a piece of the puzzle, but the bigger picture was still unclear. Somewhere out there, Kale Vorn was plotting his next move, and humanity's survival depended on stopping him. For now, though, they had a lead, and that was enough to keep going. The cruiser soared back into space, its engines humming softly as it disappeared into the void. Ahead lay untold dangers, but Daniel and his team were ready. They had seen the darkness, and they knew what was at stake. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The galaxy was vast, a swirling sea of stars and planets that stretched farther than the human mind could comprehend. For years, humanity had ventured into this endless expanse, eager to explore, learn, and connect with other intelligent life forms. But not everything in the universe was friendly or welcoming. Tensions between Earth and the Galactic Council, a coalition of alien species who governed much of known space, had been growing for decades. The Council saw humans as reckless, newcomers too quick to expand and too stubborn to follow rules. Humans, on the other hand, felt they were being unfairly treated, pushed aside by older civilizations unwilling to share power. It was against this uneasy backdrop that Jacob Hayes found himself chosen for one of the most important missions of his life. A diplomat known for his calm manner and sharp intellect, Jacob had spent years negotiating treaties and smoothing over conflicts both on Earth and among the colonies. He wasn't flashy or loud. Instead, he relied on logic and patience to get results. This time, however, the stakes were higher than ever. The Galactic Council had summoned an envoy from Earth to discuss terms of coexistence. If things went well, it might mean lasting peace. If they didn't, no one wanted to think about what would happen next. Accompanying Jacob on this mission was Rachel Miller, a brilliant astrophysicist whose expertise in alien technology made her indispensable. While Jacob handled the talking, Rachel's job was to ensure they understood any technical details thrown their way. She was quieter than Jacob, but equally determined. Her mind worked like a machine, always analyzing, always questioning. Together they formed a solid team, though neither of them felt particularly confident about the task ahead. Their journey began aboard the Horizon, a sleek starship equipped with advanced shields and communication systems. It was fast, reliable, and designed for long-distance travel. As the ship left Earth's orbit and entered the void of space, Jacob stood by a viewport, staring out at the infinite blackness dotted with distant suns. "Do you think we'll make it back?" he asked softly, almost to himself. Rachel glanced, up from her tablet, where she'd been reviewing data about Eridanus Prime, the Council's homeworld. "We don't have much of a choice," she replied. "If we fail, it won't just be us paying the price." Jacob nodded but said nothing more. They both knew the risks. The Council's summons had come without warning, delivered in a tone that bordered on hostile. There was no explanation, no hint of what the meeting would entail. All they knew was that failure wasn't an option. As the horizon approached Eridanus Prime, the tension aboard the ship grew palpable. The planet loomed large outside the windows, its surface shimmering with strange colors that seemed to shift and dance. It was beautiful, yet unsettling. Rachel double-checked her equipment while Jacob reviewed his notes one last time. Neither spoke. The weight of what lay ahead pressed down on them like a physical force. When they landed, they were greeted by a group of alien escorts who led them to a massive structure in the heart of the city. The building was unlike anything they'd ever seen, a towering monument of twisting metal and glowing crystals. Inside, the air hummed with energy, and the walls pulsed faintly, as if alive. They were taken to a grand chamber where the council members sat in silence, their forms ranging from insectoid creatures with glittering exoskeletons to gelatinous beings encased in transparent pods. At the center of it all was Zorath, the council's leader. Towering over everyone else, his chitinous body gleamed under the soft light, and his multifaceted eyes fixed on Jacob with an intensity that made the human feel small and exposed. "Envoy of Earth," Zorath began, his voice deep and resonant, echoing through the chamber. "You stand accused of violating sacred space treaties. Your kind has trespassed where it does not belong, disrupted ancient balances, and threatened the stability of our union." Jacob stepped forward, his hands steady despite the knot forming in his stomach. "Respected council members, I assure you that humanity seeks only peaceful cooperation. We are explorers, learners, eager to contribute to the greater good of the galaxy. Any perceived transgressions are misunderstandings, not acts of aggression." Before Jacob could say more, chaos erupted. A deafening explosion tore through the chamber, shaking the very foundations of the building. Flames engulfed the area, and screams filled the air. In the confusion, Jacob was knocked off his feet. When he tried to rise, another blast sent him sprawling again. Pain shot through his body and darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. Through the haze, he saw Rachel scrambling toward him, her face pale with terror. "Jacob!" she shouted, reaching out to grab his arm, but before she could pull him to safety, a third explosion ripped through the room. The force threw Rachel backward, and when she looked up, Jacob was gone, buried beneath rubble and smoke. Tears streamed down her face as she realized there was nothing she could do. The council members were also in disarray, some injured, others shouting orders in panicked tones. Rachel forced herself to move, knowing she couldn't stay there. She stumbled toward an exit, dodging falling debris and bursts of fire. Her mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. Who had attacked? Why? And how would humanity respond when they learned their envoy had been killed? Outside, the sky was dark, clouds of ash and smoke blotting out the light. Rachel collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. Around her, the once majestic city now resembled a war zone. Buildings burned, sirens wailed, and frightened aliens fled in every direction. She pulled out her communicator, desperate to send a message back to Earth. But static greeted her attempts. Whatever had caused the explosion had also disrupted communications. As night fell over Eridanus Prime, Rachel sat alone amidst the ruins, clutching her device tightly. She replayed the events in her mind, searching for answers. Something about the attack didn't add up. Why would the council summon them only to kill them? It didn't make sense, unless someone else was pulling the strings. Rachel resolved to find out. She couldn't let Jacob's death, or the potential war it might spark, go unanswered. With trembling hands, she recorded a brief message detailing what little she knew and hid it in a secure compartment of her suit. Then, she set off into the shadows, determined to survive and uncover the truth. Little did she know, her actions would set off a chain reaction that would change the fate of the galaxy forever.